Welcome to the WealthStack podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rosic, the director of WealthStack Content and Solutions. Today, I'm joined by Nicholas Palahnuk, founder and CEO of PhilanthPro. Today's topic, how this innovative cloud-based software allows clients to engage with their financial advisors to create goals-based financial plans for charitable accounts. And we'll unpack exactly what that means in a little bit. But Nicholas, I did want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about this.
Thank you for having me, Shannon. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And before we dive into our first segment, I do want to start with your background because it is incredibly interesting. And I always joke that I like to hit folks with the hardest questions first. And that is really just around your background. What makes you, well, you, and what led to founding PhilanthPro?
Great question. So I started as a wealth advisor quite young. I know you know my background a little bit. So I was 21 when I became a CFP, a certified financial planner. And I spent my career in wealth management. And as I grew as a wealth advisor, I recognized this increasing interest in philanthropy amongst my clients. And so I started to do some research and looked into this, and it was reflecting what I saw in the actual market, which was people are becoming more interested in philanthropy and doing amazing things with the wealth that they have. And they're also interested in getting their next generation engaged. And so I brought together a group of people, a group of philanthropists and their advisors, and started to study what are the problems that they have? What are the things that they see that could be fixed, and what are tools that could help them to be able to do a better job at what they wanted to do. And so we brought this group together and created this idea, which was PhilanthPro. And from there, we developed it into the platform that it is.
And you became the youngest CFP in Canada, like you said, and you started your career at 21 years old. I was just graduating at that point with a very vague sense of what I wanted to do with my life. And I can confidently say now, I think things worked out. So thank goodness. But in all seriousness, growing up, did you always know you wanted to go into this field? Was there a single moment in time or event that triggered you that said, you know what, I want to spend my life helping people essentially?
So as a teenager, I spent time in East Africa. So for
Wow.
several months, I was volunteering, doing humanitarian work. And so I was very passionate about that, was very interested in business as well. So I read Canadian business magazine called Maclean's. I remember reading that like 12, 13 years old, very interested in business, was interested in stocks. I had like an E-Trade online only account type of thing where you could create a fake portfolio and test it out. So I was interested in how, that worked. And then when I got into the workplace into banking, I did my equivalent of like a Series 7 exam when I was 18 in Canada. It's called the Canadian Securities Course. And I scored really high on that. And at that time, I realized, okay, so maybe I should go down that path, and start to study. And so I challenged the CFP exam and did that at 21. I got licensed. I had spent a couple years selling investments within a bank even before that. So I was able to qualify for the full CFP with my work experience. So yeah, it was very, very young. It all kind of happened quite quickly. And then I spent my time as a wealth advisor until now, realizing, you know what, there's something here. I personally opened a foundation and got more involved. It was 2 years in my own philanthropy as I've grown in my success. And I thought, there's something here. There's something missing, and that's really where PhilanthPro came from.
And not to turn this into a money psychology podcast, but I'm just genuinely curious if you were reading, business journals at 12, 13, did you grow up in a household that put a lot of emphasis like on planning, on money, on philanthropy alone? Or was this just something you kind of discovered on your own?
It was just something I discovered on my own. My brother was a very musical guy and was into that scene. Now he was very good with math as well. Both of us were talented, but just we were encouraged to have our own interests. I was always a quirky kid, and remember being interested in obscure things and would read lots about them and was very curious. And yeah, we were just encouraged to follow our path.
Love that. And so you went from advisor, or still an advisor, to, fintech founder. How did you build the software unless you have a secret background in coding we don't know about, and based on on all of your accomplishments thus far, I wouldn't be surprised. But has there been anything that's surprised you about this journey?
Yeah, so this is a good question. There's no secret coding background. I think when it comes to being a founder or coming up with a business and bringing it to the world, it really matters your ability to understand the problem and ask the right questions. And it's not necessarily about coding software. So we worked with an incredible team Toronto-based team that was existing and had worked on financial software before, had created stuff for the Canadian banks with great care and attention to detail. And so when we saw their portfolio, it was very clear they were an excellent partner for us to work with. The real issue was taking the problem at hand and figuring out, what are we going to do with this software, right? How are we going to position it? And what are the problems people are experiencing? And how do we synthesize all of that information and come up with a solution that's going to work, for many people? So that type of work is really a lot more understanding the problem. And I think being a wealth advisor in the space, understanding the clients, understanding my own mentality, as somebody philanthropically inclined, like, I understood the problem and was able to ask the right questions, and then that led to the creation of the software. So I don't know that necessarily understanding coding to a T is what makes a good founder, but
Well, thank you for indulging me regardless. But
no
I'd,
problem.
I'd love to hear more about the PhilanthPro software itself and who you serve and what ultimately makes this platform unique.
Yeah, so PhilanthPro itself really is built around the philanthropic client at the center, and around them, what are the issues that they deal with uniquely as a philanthropic client. Now, we have PhilanthPro and PhilanthPro Advisor. So there are two different markets. So one is going directly to the consumer, the client that has their philanthropic assets, and then the other, PhilanthPro Advisor, is for the wealth planning professional who wants to engage their client on the platform. So we have two different markets, but realistically, the actual client is always the client at the center, whether whoever is engaging either side of our business. The tool is built for the client's needs.
So when it comes to the actual, I say, charitable space, I want to dive into our first segment where I like to throw out some statistics to kind of ruminate on. And I call the segment Stats All Folks, to really kind of set the stage for the conversation. And I came across this stat, this staggering number that said, charitable accounts, including foundations, charitable trusts, and donor advised funds, hold more than 1.7 trillion in assets and support the charitable sector globally. So what was your, I would say, aha moment where you realized tech and planning tools were really just lacking in our space?
Yeah, I mean, the number is staggering. There's a ton of money in these vehicles globally. This is not an American issue. It's a global issue. When it comes to planning and coming up with strategic granting plans, figuring out where are the funds going, are they here for depletion over time? That's called a spend down. Are they here for sustainable granting? So we'd call that like a perpetuity objective. All that kind of planning is being done, if it's in Excel or some type of an ad hoc system, if it's being done at all. So there isn't really these tools. Now, the aha moment for me was just being in the industry and seeing that it's not being done, or offering my clients solutions in the Excel format for really important decisions like this. There was a moment when I had a request for a $600,000 grant, for example, and it was far in excess of the granting strategy that we had talked about. And the conversation was, well, how is this going to affect future granting? And you're trying to have the conversation without the tools. It's very difficult. As an advisor, we rely on these incredible tools we have for wealth accumulation. And so it would be great to have tools like this for deaccumulation and being able to express this in a really clear way. So that, there is not necessarily an aha moment, but simply being in the space constantly, lacking the tools, and realizing that this is a growing issue because philanthropy is growing. So it's only getting more and more important that we have these tools.
And as you said, as it's growing, I stumbled across another stat. According to BNY Mellon's charitable giving report, 91% of high net worth people agree that a charitable giving strategy is a part of their overall wealth strategy. And I thought that was absolutely staggering, saying that folks are looking to their advisors to help them with this. And, again, going down the psychology route a little bit, I'm just curious, what do you see that ultimately motivates people to contribute? Obviously, we're dealing with a very specific niche here of high net worth investors that are able to do this. We're not talking about folks that are donating to a GoFundMe $10, $20 here. These are significant grants to established foundations that's worked into an overall wealth strategy. So what's the motivation here?
Yeah, so I mean, people are involved in philanthropy, and like you said, these are meaningful people that are involved in meaningful philanthropy, meaningful giving, very strategic giving, significant sums. They're motivated to see an impact around them. And we look at studies all across the US and globally. People are not giving for the reasons that I think some wealth advisors believe. And actually, it's a fact. We believe that clients are giving in order to reduce their tax burden. But as we look at the studies, we don't see that. And in fact, when we look at countries that have very low tax jurisdictions and are not subject to a significant amount of tax, we still see significant philanthropy from the ultra high net worth. So it's not that they're giving in order to receive just a tax credit. And so that's the first kind of myth. So when you think about why are clients giving, they're giving because they want to see change around them. They're giving out of an abundance. They're giving because they want to affect the communities that they live in a positive way. They're also giving because they want to pass on values to the next generation. There's all sorts of reasons, and you can just start to look at the research out there. There's just an incredible treasure trove of research on why people give. And it is true that clients do look to their advisors for their strategic plan on giving. They view it as part of their wealth plan. We've listened to clients. That is what they expect. Now, we're not necessarily doing that. So as an industry, having a tool like this, I think is something that's important to promote that conversation.
And as we've established, there's clearly a need for technology that streamlines this whole process. And as you alluded to earlier, I'd imagine there's a lot of folks opting for really the wild west of Excel spreadsheets when it comes to tracking this data, which incredibly scary, but obviously means there's an opportunity there. So walk me through the day-to-day interaction an advisor would have with your software and make the case for getting it all out of Excel.
Yeah, of course. And that's the thing about Excel is, it's ad hoc. So you're having to create some type of a formula or process to use it. It's not necessarily going to be robust, and it's certainly not going to cover off the things that we're covering off, like your minimum distribution requirements being forecast and all the different mechanisms that we've built into PhilanthPro that clients and advisors both really love. So when you think about, okay, so how does an advisor use the platform? Really, it starts with a conversation with the client to be able to build out a financial plan for their charitable vehicle. So whether they have a donor advised fund, whether they have a foundation or a charitable trust, the conversation begins with, how long is this to be around for? Should we be comparing things like a 10-year spend down, or should we be looking at a longer term sustainable granting plan? What is the goal with the fund? And then you can get the family involved as well to say, well, what is the goal, for the next generation? Do they want to take on the management of the vehicle? Is this something that they want to keep in the family? So really continuing the type of wealth planning conversation you would have on the wealth accumulation side and what your strategies are, now shifting it to the philanthropy side of the client's lives and asking them these questions. Then from there, the advisor is going to create a plan for the vehicle, including what the investments are going to be, what the forecast rates of return will be, what is the granting going to look like then based on the investments and the goals that the client has stated. And then they're going to present this to the client, perhaps to the family, get them involved, have them log in, and really start a relationship with the client that's deeper and more focused on philanthropy. That's how the advisor would be using the tool.
And what about is there a client side of it as well that they can access?
Yes, that's right. So the tool, like we said, the tool is really built around the client experience, the client at the center. So now that the client has a financial plan for their philanthropy, they go in and have a granting plan or a grant planning tool. And from that tool, they can enter in the grants that they're going to make. So at that point, they can see, okay, how am I doing against my goals that I've stated? How am I doing against the minimum requirements that are going to be asked of me? But also, how am I doing against what the optimal amount is? And that's what we're calculating each year, is to say, what is the optimal amount, and being able to see that in the future. And this is where, right now there's, some guardrails around, okay, I must distribute this amount according to the IRS, or within a DAF, perhaps there's a minimum or no minimum. But with our software, there's these optimal amounts that clients can reach and stretch goals to be able to come up with a good plan. So this is where the client is going in and interacting in that space, as well as other features for organization and management. So they can keep track of their contacts, they can keep track of the people that they've granted out, and just really stay, in touch with their philanthropy. So it's quite centered around the client.
And obviously, there's a pretty high burden of compliance when dealing with charitable giving. How are you and how is the software helping, with things like tax, legal, and regulatory obligations of filing?
Yeah, so that was one issue that came up, a big issue that came up in our research. And so keeping clients organized, giving them a place to keep track of things, having other partners like tax advisors and legal advisors, having their login to PhilanthPro to be able to upload and download documents, bankers being able to upload statements. There's a lot of interactivity that we've built into the platform so that clients can meet those obligations. Giving should be fun. It should be something that's beautiful and brings the family together and is a very enjoyable activity. And so when it comes to removing some of this friction that people have in keeping track of these things, we're all for that. We were very happy to help with that.
And you mentioned keeping track of things. So I'd imagine a big emphasis on the platform then is, next best actions for advisors to help keep their clients on track. Because say if you miss one of your donations, there's some big implications there. Or if the money is not allocated or distributed correctly, there could be some major problems. So how is the platform facilitating that?
Yeah, by having a plan. And I think when it comes to doing things last minute, as we do see in studies, there tends to be a rush at the end of the year for some families and some foundations. By having a plan in place, we can avoid these types of rushed activities. Knowing when you have to file things and working with your accountant is one thing, but really understanding what is the goal for this? Who are we donating to or distributing funds out to? And what are the dates that we're going to make these payments out to the nonprofit? So there's really a lot of work that goes into the planning, which to then alleviate this rush and missing things.
And what kind of feedback have you received from users, and how is it shaping the development of the software?
It's been amazing. The feedback, I mean, we co-created this really by talking to clients and understanding from advisors and other folks in the industry what it is that would solve their problem. So, it started with a conversation and that has continued. We've listened and said, how are you using the software? We've been developing different use cases. We've been looking at comparing impact investments with regular marketable securities and how we can show that on the platform. So there's been all sorts of use cases that have come out of launching this into the public sphere. But we really started with that iterative process of talking to people to understand what mattered to them. And so that's going to continue on in our company.
And one of my favorite quotes that you put out into the ether and various press releases when you first launched, you said the financial industry is designed to help people accumulate wealth, not give it away. And that's a problem for philanthropic clients and their advisors. I just love that because you think of wealth management, it's all about the accumulation phase, but we are not talking enough about decumulation or charitable giving like this. So I just had to shout that quote out because I just love it.
Well, thanks. I mean, I really mean it. When I look at the wealth management industry, we tend to obsess about that, and it's not what clients are asking for. When we listen and do studies and ask, open-ended questions, what matters, it's not just to accumulate wealth, at all costs. It's not just to pay the least amount of tax possible. That's not what our clients are telling us. I wasn't hearing that when I talked to my clients, and it certainly isn't what the studies show. And so that the industry needs to transform, and I think it is. It's we're getting there. I can see it all around me that there is deep conversation happening, but it's great to have tools. And so being a part of the development of a tool like this that's going to contribute to this evolution is really exciting.
And you've obviously hit the ground running since launch, but what can folks expect to be on the roadmap for PhilanthPro moving forward?
So we're going to keep listening to our clients. We're going to listen and see how they're using PhilanthPro, what they can benefit from. Obviously, data analytics is of big interest to us. Connections is very important and is something that we're going to be able to do as we grow in size and scale. So there's lots of things that we've got in our pipeline. But really, the most important thing is to keep listening to our users. They're informing what we're going to do, and we're learning from them as we have right from the beginning.
That's the way to go about it. But at this time, it is time for segment 2 of this episode, Nicholas, which I call Ask Us Anything. And I've gone out to the social universe and asked them to submit questions they want answered by you. And we had a couple folks slide into the DMs this week with the first question being, how is this tech different from grant management software that's currently available?
That's a great question. Yes, and there is grant management software available, and that software is great. It's perfect for what it's built for, which is really a more institutional approach. So larger foundations issuing multiple grants out and needing a management system for those types of grants. That type of software is really relevant to nonprofits and to again institutional types of clients. When it came to individual families, we might call them like a kitchen table philanthropist type of family. There wasn't really something there when it came to families that were really looking to make strategic decisions over a long term. So this could be, very large foundations, some of the largest foundations. There wasn't software for the future forecasting. Where are we going with this? Where are things going to be in 3, 5 years based on investment returns, et cetera? So that type of work wasn't being done. So this really fits a niche. We don't view this as software that replaces anything, but it's simply an additive tool within the industry.
Great. And the other question we got, with the great wealth transfer underway, how are shifting demographics transforming philanthropy? It's no secret that women and younger generations will ultimately be handling the larger share of wealth.
That's a very insightful comment, and that is very, very true. So when we look at intergenerational wealth transfer, and we look at who's getting those funds, we see a tremendous increase in interest in philanthropy. So the movement of wealth into women's hands, the movement of wealth into this next generation's hands are definitely going to transform the industry. And from a philanthropic standpoint, decision making is moving on to a new generation, and so that's also going to change the whole philanthropic landscape. So we've actually just had Dr. Xanthi Sharf join our board. She's going to lead our thought leadership around this, helping us with research and really understanding and getting our head around what the next generation is looking for from a philanthropic standpoint and women, and be able to have PhilanthPro respond to those needs, as well as providing research to the industry around what these groups are thinking and what we see, so that we can help everyone to be successful.
Well, it feels much more inclusive now, especially post-pandemic, with everything going virtual and online. I remember just the proliferation of, crowdsourced fundraising that was happening during that time, and having the accessibility just to be able to go on my phone and be able to donate something that, for a cause that maybe that was close to me or resonated with me. So I feel like it's been an interesting transition, at least in the philanthropy world, that folks have at least now more access to be able to give. Are you seeing that as well and following those trends?
Yeah, I would say definitely. But I think the fact is that you are interested in doing that. You're part of our next gen. The fact that you're giving money online, the fact that you're going and supporting causes with what you have, I think that's the important trend. Is people in this age group, people that are millennials, people that are this next generation, are interested in having an impact and are very, very interested in donating. And we're seeing them interested in causes over institutions. So they're very, very motivated towards a cause. I personally very interested in mental health, particularly youth mental health. And this is a cause or an issue that I'm very much behind versus institutions. So there is a shift that's happening amongst us. Of course, technology, we're gonna see the development and the advancement. But I think the human behavior of us as a generation is really interesting, and that's what we want to study.
Absolutely. Well, I will be looking forward to those studies then in the future, because this stuff fascinates me as well. But I appreciate you being put on the spot and your insightful answers for that segment. But now we have come to my favorite part of the episode that I affectionately call Stack It or Whack It. So I'm going to throw out a few technologies. Be warned, they're not always necessarily wealth tech related. And sometimes they're just random thoughts, especially if I know you. And you tell me if they are worth the hype or not. So essentially, stack it, use it, whack it, lose it. So I know you split your time between Canada and California. So I
Yes.
have to ask, Canadian food versus LA, poutine versus tacos. Stack it or whack
Canadian, Canadian. Okay, so I would say come to Canada for our landscapes, come to Canada for our people, our culture. Canada is an incredible place, diverse. I would say definitely I would stack the tacos.
it.
Go to I like, the California food is definitely me. Don't get me wrong, poutine is great. And like, there's once a year we have a Toronto uh winter market, like a festival, and so I always get a poutine. It's amazing. But cheese curds, fries, gravy. I would prefer a beautiful taco somewhere in like Palm Springs, California. So that's my yes. I would prefer that. So
All right.
stack them.
All right. Fair enough. We'll stack the tacos. I could eat tacos pretty much every day, and they are definitely in the rotation at least once a week. But I was going to ask you about your toppings for poutine. So cheese curds, gravy. I respect it.
Yes, that's the traditional. That's the traditional one. So
All right, you're going for the nap afterwards. I respect it. All right. Second question. Alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I have to ask your thoughts on it. Crowdsourcing fundraising, things like GoFundMe. stack it or whack it? Or do they need to be, does there need to be a new iteration of it eventually?
Oh, I think stack it. I think that when you look at the innovation, the next generation is not going to do things the same way. And when you think about, what motivates people to give, it's not necessarily a tax receipt. We've learned that, right? So when we think about these types of innovations, I think it's amazing. Human generosity is a beautiful thing. Kindness is a beautiful thing. So I mean, stack it 100%.
Love it. I feel like I probably knew the answer to that, but had to ask anyways. Um, and last one, bonus. You're getting three this time just because I'm enjoying this topic and
Okay.
conversation with you. But I stumbled across something when I was just doing a little research just in the philanthropy world around lean philanthropy, where it's founders getting more involved, like on the ground, boots on the ground and outside of just donating, but they're actually physically there. So,
Yep.
when it comes to that trend, I think we saw Jack Dorsey do it. He really
Yeah.
led a lot of that. So stack or whack when it comes to lean philanthropy, and your thoughts on
Stack, 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 stack the
it.
stack. I can't say that enough. When you look at the power that people have and you look at their treasure, the money that they have, their ties, all their connections, their time, their ability to put in time and volunteer, and their talent, right? Whatever it is that they're really good at, all four of those things can come together and do something beautiful for other people. So when it comes to just writing a check, that's amazing. And people need that. We need, to fund these different organizations and these different causes, but all these other aspects, if you're able to make a connection that's really meaningful and can change the outcome for a charity or for another person, or you're able to volunteer your time, or you're a really great graphic designer and you can design some flyer for a grassroots movement, do it. Like, that is amazing. That's philanthropy. That's all part of philanthropy. So stack it 100%.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, Nicholas, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. Appreciate all your insightful commentary and insights today. Feel free to tell listeners where they can find out more about you and what you're working on at PhilanthPro.
Yeah, definitely. So, add us to LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with people on there. Philanthropro.com is our site. And I think it's important to see the platform. If you want to see it and get in the know about a brand new piece of software, sign up for a demo. Our team is ready and is showing it to lots of people, and it certainly will set you apart. So come visit us and get to know us.
And I can attest to that. It is certainly worth checking out. I have gotten a demo and it is pretty incredible. So certainly take him up on that, folks. And be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack podcast on all major podcasting platforms and follow all things WealthStack on wealthmanagement.com, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in.